Welcome to episode 298 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat NASCAR with Matthew Vinson.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who's checking in via QR code to start this podcast, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and you can find me on the internet. SportsGeekHQ.com is the best place to find me. At Sean Callanan on all social media platforms. But you can go to SportsGeekHQ.com to check out the podcast, sign up for the newsletter, or reach out to me via socials and send me a message that way. First of all, the other place you can find content, and thank you very much for the feedback from the Sports Geek Amplify series. You can check that out at sportsgeekamplify.com, but it is just below in your podcast feed, whatever platform you're using, whether it's Apple, Google, Spotify, Pocket Casts, both the Sports Geek Amplify series and all Sports Geek episodes are available there. Thank you very much for the people who've actually given feedback on the new series, the format. Thank you very much to the 5 amazing sports technology companies that are part of that series: Vlast, Timo, Stellarago, Ubi Park, and Zoomph. Please check out those episodes. It's a different style of podcast, diving in on the product and how it can be used. And I'm a really big believer in sports business. Sports technology is going to help sports business bounce back. It's starting to see that in my part of the world here. I'm lucky enough to be going to games, and stay tuned for a really special Sounds of the Game later on in this episode. So yeah, please check it out, sportsgeekamplify.com. If you think that any of those episodes, like any episode of Sports Geek, is of value, please share it. Please share it with colleagues on the platform that you choose. Before we get into today's episode, just a quick mention of the Sports Geek Patreon. Thank you very much for the supporters of the Sports Geek Patreon. They are supporting what we are doing in the sports business content space. You can do so as a personal for as little as $4 a month, or you can do it with an annual subscription, which makes it much easier. That support goes and helps pay for the cost to keep the podcast up and running, and pays for my talented folk behind the scenes like DJ Joel and James, my podcast editor. So thank you very much if you're for those of you who are a Patreon subscriber. I'm going to be working on a few other things to give patrons some other special access, maybe even listening in to live podcast interviews. If that's something you're interested in, please let me know. I'd love to bring you further into the experience. But you can go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon to become a Sports Geek Patreon. This chat with Matt Vinson from NASCAR, a long-time friend of mine. We have met via seat. It's really great to have a chat with him about what it's like in the world of motorsport and NASCAR in particular. So this is my chat with Matthew Vinson from NASCAR. Very happy to welcome a good friend of mine from the world of NASCAR, Matthew Vinson. He is the Director of Track Marketing Southeast Region at NASCAR. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, appreciate you having me on, Sean.
No problems. So first of all, as I normally, we've known each other for a long time, met at multiple seat conferences over the years. And very happy for the people who are watching a video snippet. Very happy that you're a supporter of my esports team, Gravitas, repping the Gravitas boys on the call today. Yeah. Very much happy about that. How did you get your start in the world of sports business?
Yeah, so I'm going to start even further back because I took a little bit of a different career path. My background's actually in engineering. Studied mechanical engineering back at UCF in Orlando. While I was there, interned at Lockheed Martin, worked on our Arrowhead night vision system for the Apache helicopter. And while I was doing all of that, just wasn't really happy with the way my career was going, wasn't really enjoying myself. I think my dad probably wishes I stayed in engineering just because I think it pays a lot more. But I grew up having a passion for sports. Didn't really know you could work in sports or how to even start. Started doing some research and found out UCF, where I was already going, had a top 5 program. I applied. I did not get in. I think the first time I interviewed with the directors there, I probably went in a little over my head, thought I would be the next general manager of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Dr. Sutton, who was there at the time, saw right through it. So I spent a year basically building my sports experience. I worked for UCF Athletics. I was doing everything from taking tickets to setting up track and field to really getting the softball fields ready, working UCF football games. Started to do a little bit more background research on actual realistic careers in sports. Wanted to find a way to pair my passion in data and analytics as an engineer with sports. Started to find digital marketing as a realistic path. Reapplied to the program at UCF. Got in. From there, after graduation, I went out to San Francisco for a few years, where I worked for Allison McCulley, who was Dr. Sutton's GA way back when. She's now VP over at Monumental. She's really essentially running the Go-Go's and the Mystics and overseeing their creative department. But it's where I really cut my teeth on digital. I had a background in HTML from just teaching myself HTML back in the day, ripping off website code, building AngelFire, GeoCities websites, but really learned more on the email marketing side, a lot of social media strategies while at High Five Marketing. And then about 7 years ago, the opportunity at Daytona International Speedway opened up. They were undergoing a huge $450 million renovation called Daytona Rising. And Julie Giese at the time brought me in. Julie's now president over at Phoenix Raceway, overseeing NASCAR's championship event. She brought me in as a one-man team. As the venue was undergoing a renovation, they wanted to really bring up the social and digital aspects up to par. So started as a one-man team, had leadership that really saw the importance in digital and invested in it. And over the course of 7 years, grew from a one-man team up to 3, doing everything from website to social to mobile apps to SMS, anything digital.
So I mean, it's really interesting. A similar background to myself, coming from you engineering, me full geek. I think it's really applicable. Like a lot of people trying to get into the world of sports and come at it from, hey, I'm a sports fan, but there's so many transferable skills from other parts of the world, and that's so it's not just, hey, I'm going to be an assistant general manager, I'm going to be the next Billy Bean and that kind of thing. It is really, I've got this skill set. There's definite roles, and especially in the tech side, right? If if you've got geek skills, if you can still cut HTML, you've got obviously ability in digital, and then the other side of engineering, it's all ones and zeros. It's all tracking down analytics, and sort of right place, right time to sort of bring that skill set to the world of digital. So there is a lot of transferable skills if you're coming in, and I think if you're trying to break in or doing that career change like I've done, and and you've just sort of described there, you've got to say, well, these skills that I have learned in other areas and in other jobs still very much apply, and so those early geek skills still held you in good stead, especially in a one-man show. It's not like you were like, I'm just going to hand this over to my web developer and I'm going to give this to my graphics guy. When you're a man wearing many hats, did it give you that sort of broader skill set that I guess a digital marketer needs these days?
For sure. And I mean, I get asked this when I speak to whether it's grad programs or undergrads, like, how do you set yourself apart? So you're all taking the same courses as every other college, and you're all learning the business aspects, but do you know HTML? Do you know how to use Photoshop? Can you edit a video? That may not end up being your focus of what you end up doing, but if you're trying to get into marketing, or even if you're trying to do something in sales, knowing how to do some of those like extracurriculars is going to help set yourself apart. So whether it's taking time to learn HTML or learn any programming language or understand what a CMS system looks like and how to edit it, that's going to just take one step further to set you apart than everyone else in your cohort.
Definitely. It's the same. Dive in, learn the platforms yourself, because then you can bring them to the table. So, getting into that, I guess that first sports role at NASCAR. Explain how that, for the people who don't, not familiar with the world of motorsport and NASCAR in particular, because a lot of people we're talking to are running football teams or basketball teams, and you have that regular cadence of here's a home game, here's an away game, here's how we're setting our schedule, and here's what we're doing in the digital thing. How is it different when you were working in NASCAR from a track point of view?
I'm going to start first with how they're similar, because they are a little bit similar in the aspect from a track aspect, which is where most of my background at NASCAR has been on the track side. So if you think of Daytona International Speedway, it's a venue. So it's very similar to Madison Square Garden or O2 Arena, right? So most of our events just happen to be motorsports events. But when Madison Square Garden is targeting fans for an Elton John concert, that's going to be a different segment that they're targeting a Lil Wayne concert for, right? So we're doing the same thing, except our events are motorsports events. So we're targeting one set of fans for NASCAR, a different set of fans for Daytona Supercross, a different set of fans for sports cars. How I think they get a little bit different. From a venue perspective, the difference is, one, going to be size. Our venues are massive. Daytona is 500 acres. We've got 100,000 seats. We can host 60,000 more campers on site. The infrastructure needed from a technology standpoint to really run that from a digital perspective is a lot more. So whether that's your Wi-Fi systems, your service towers, your DAS systems, just the technology infrastructure, you need a lot more of it than you do in a smaller arena. From a sport aspect, and I'll speak more to NASCAR. We host several different types of motorsports events at our venues, but from a NASCAR perspective, it's a traveling circus, right? So you got 40 teams going week to week to 30 or so different tracks for 36 weeks out of the year. And not only that, that's one series, or you can say section of level of drivers. You also have two other series with you at the same time. So not only do you have those 40 teams, you've got 40 other teams from two different series, all competing at the same venue over the course of 3 to 4 days. And not only do you have fans coming for that day, but another aspect that helps sets us apart is that we've got a whole nother segment of fans that are camping with us, right? So can you imagine going to an AFL game or a rugby match, not just going for a day, but you're there for 5 to 7 days, you're having a great time, you're taking in like a festival type of atmosphere. That brings in a lot of challenges, everything from security to access to restrooms to guest services. So we're planning for a bunch of different segments of people for one large event over the course of 3 to 4 weeks. And we're doing that about 5 to 6 different times per year at each of our different venues.
Yeah, so that's where it is, like you're right, the similarities and the differences, but that's where the tracks are very similar to, I guess, the stadium, the profiles of stadiums, like as you are the custodians of the event and you're trying to make sure the event is good. And so it's part promotion of the event and amplification of the event and amplification of everyone having a good time. But there's a big portion of it that is, customer service and making sure there's any issues there, because it's not the same as, a football team at the venue, or even, in your instance, a NASCAR team that's competing at your track. They're promoting and they're talking directly to like their fans and their tribe. And so how do you get that balance of being the promoter, hey, come down to the track, but then also getting that mix right of experiential and customer service and the burden that puts on your social and digital teams?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it comes with great partnerships with the sanctioning body, with the drivers, with the teams to provide a lot of the content. So because we're not a team, we don't have as much access to our athletes as someone who runs the Atlanta Falcons might have, right? They can go down and film great pieces of content. If they need to record something to play over the PA system to let fans know to wear their masks, they can go down and record that with Matt Ryan, right? So for us, it takes a lot of coordination with our sanctioning body, with the teams, with the drivers. How we would split it up, or how, when I was at Daytona, the things we would focus on is we would let the tracks focus on the guest experience.
Yep.
Anything from, we want to inform them when gates open, where they can see their favorite driver, when an autograph session's taking place. Okay, what does certain access get you? If you get a fan zone pass, what does that mean? And we would let NASCAR focus on the competition and the storylines of the actual racing.
Yep.
And then from a day-to-day perspective, when it comes to race day, we would focus on showcasing those great fan experience moments and trying to showcase to our fans, here's what you're missing out on. And we would leverage NASCAR and our different sanctioning body partners to show what's going on the actual event itself. And
so people of you who don't know, like, and you've described it around, there's camping at massive like acreage of venue. Let's at least go back to pre-COVID days. What is an event like at Daytona? It's like an iconic venue. It's whether you call it a stadium, but it's a iconic venue worldwide. What is it like when there is a full house and everyone is there? What's that experience like being at Daytona on a race day?
So I'll focus on just the race day itself, because remember, we've got campers here 4 to 5 days already. So typically we would start about 4 weeks out from one of our major events. That's when we're starting our digital communication plan. That's when it really goes into full effect. We're talking to our fans throughout the year, but about 4 weeks out is when we really start to inform them. We're telling them where to park, when gates open, where they can see their favorite driver in an autograph session, how to enhance their visit with more access. We're reminding them to download the app, kind of your standard stuff that you're letting your fans know in ahead of time, so their experience when they get to the event, they already know what to do, right? Our fans love to tailgate, similar to football fans across our nation in America here. But for the Daytona 500, we have fans sleeping out in the parking lots overnight, and they're starting to have a good time essentially from the moment they wake up. Digitally, as soon as they step on property, we're starting to talk to them. So if they have our mobile app, as soon as they get within our geo-fence, we're pinging them with geo-targeted messaging. If they've subscribed to our SMS channel, we're hitting them up with text messages. If they follow us on social, we're setting the stage on social for what's going to be a great day. Then throughout the day, we're informing them on driver appearances, autograph sessions, where to take their trophy, where to take a photo with the trophy. If there's Dale Jr.'s on stage, here's how you can go ask him a question in a fan Q&A. And then with things like our mobile app, we're doing some really sophisticated stuff where integrating partners into our communication. So if you're walking in through our Toyota entrance, you're going to be served a customized welcome message from Toyota and a list of 5 things you have to see within their branded experience. But if you're going to, a football field away and you walk through our Advent Health Injector or entrance, you're going to be served an entirely different experience. So we were doing a lot of that, a lot of geo-based and beacon messaging. So we installed over 900 beacons throughout our venue. We knew if you were in line for a hot dog, and we're monitoring our social channels, and we see that there's a large line at that particular concession stand. Hey, we can ping customers with our mobile app near that certain location that you can go up 1 flight of stairs and get the same hot dog. Oh, and here's a $2 off coupon. And throughout the day, as some of our driver appearances and things take place, one of the coolest aspects, especially in our sport, and especially in NASCAR, is the fan access. So if you get a fan zone wristband for the Daytona 500, you could literally be standing next to Chase Elliott 15 minutes before he puts on his helmet and gets in the car. In no other sport can you say that. You cannot imagine talking to Tom Brady, give him a high five 15 minutes before he's about to go through his first pass for the Super Bowl. So I think that's another aspect that really sets us apart. And then, like I said, once the race starts, we're starting to showcase some fan photos. We're starting to showcase different viewing points and fan experience aspects, and we let NASCAR focus on the competition. And we help support each other, whether it's through shared content, going back and forth, or different content campaigns of, okay, if they've got a really cool piece of content that we want to amplify, we'll do it on our channels. If we've got a really cool vantage point we want them to share, we'll ask them to share it on theirs.
And I'm sure you've been in the game for a while now, and as you're talking about Wi-Fi being rolled out, beacons being rolled out. Have you seen that uptick from your fans, especially on venue, just grow every time you roll out some more tech, you roll out better activations, and the posts that are tagging the venue on Instagram? Does it just keep getting more and more year on year? Because you've enabled it? Because I'm assuming early on it would have been hard, 100,000, 200,000 people there, the network's creaking just to be able to get out a text, let alone a high definition video. But as 4G, 5G, and adding more tech to the infrastructure, has that just exploded, the user generated content from fans?
I wouldn't say exploded. It's certainly grown since I started.
Yep.
And when we launched the new venue in 2016, we had Wi-Fi in all of the major fan access points, like our concourses, our campgrounds. But where we didn't have it was out in the grandstands. So, when you're messaging to fans that you now have brand new Wi-Fi here at the venue, and they're out there trying to take a video and share the video of the on-track action and they can't get out, you learn some things, right? So we've started to see whether it's adoption of our mobile app downloads heading into events or just continued growth on our social channels. We've certainly seen that adoption happen. One interesting aspect too is just the way we have to think about some of that venue tech from our perspective. When we were owned by ISC, which was the company that owned us prior to our merger with NASCAR, they own 14 different racetracks, right? So it can get pretty costly to implement point of sale systems and beacons and all of this technology across 14 different venues. So how they approached it and how our IT team approached it was similar to how NASCAR packs up and goes to the next venue. We're doing the same thing. So we're working with, we're not hard. I mean, Daytona was a little bit different, but all of our other tracks weren't hard installing beacons. They were taking beacons, setting them up for the weekend, grabbing them, moving them to the next venue, taking point of sale systems, setting them up for the weekend, taking your ticket scanners, packing them up, moving them on to the next weekend. So you have to think about it from a cost efficiency standpoint. How do you continue to build upon the tech that you have at your different venues without having to hard install it, because your venues are sometimes only being used 4 or 5 days out of the year?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it very much fits into the traveling circus, moniker that you used before. Like, it is literally pack everything up and go. Moving on from where, when you were working at the track to your now role, which I mentioned before, Director of Track Marketing, Southeast Region. What does that role entail, and like how is that different from your previous role, working at the venue?
Sure, I'll start kind of way back when. So NASCAR and ISC were both originally founded by the same man, Bill France, way back when. Throughout time, they spun off the tracks, which became ISC. That became a publicly owned company, and NASCAR, which was the sanctioning body of the races, stayed private. In 2019, the granddaughter of Bill France and the son of Bill France decided we're going to bring everything back in-house, bring it back to a private company, merge the two companies. It provides a lot more control over things like schedule date changes, rule implementations, when you control everything, right? So what that did was it facilitated a shift in the structure. I think that combined with COVID amplified some of the staff changes, but each of the tracks used to have a marketing team. So I was digital marketing for Daytona. We had a digital marketing team in Talladega, at Richmond, at Auto Club in California. Through the merger, and we kind of gone through it now since end of 2019 and really focused on the process through 2020. We now have a centralized model that's split up into 4 regions. So our region, the Southeast region, now is Daytona, here in Daytona Beach, Florida, Homestead, Miami, down south in Florida, and Talladega, which is probably our sport's second most well-known track. It's a very similar track to Daytona. So we focus on essentially marketing our key events at those 3 tracks. And instead of having a team at each track, we now have one centralized team of about 6 of us. We're kind of spread throughout the country. Most of us are in Daytona, but we have a few out in Talladega and some in Charlotte. And now we're focused exclusively on, okay, how do we put together the marketing strategy for our key events? And then how do we loop in NASCAR's brand team, NASCAR's advertising team, NASCAR's creative team to help execute that marketing plan so that we can sell out and continue to sell tickets?
I mean, it's very much an efficiency play, because I'm assuming, NASCAR fans that come to Daytona also go to Talladega, and there would have been, two effectively competing marketing campaigns and not crossing over audiences and that kind of stuff. So sort of having that, so you sort of get to have that 30,000 foot view across the tracks and build some efficiencies in there from your campaigns.
And for sure, I mean, and it's funny that one of my teammates now who came from Talladega was a very similar roles to me. We would say that we were extremely competitive with each other, right? So we're competing over the same segment of audiences. Like when you think of Talladega and Daytona, we're both pretty similar driving distances to Atlanta, which is a huge population area, right? So aside from just competing with the same audience, you have basically processes and different platforms that are now being consolidated, right? So all of the data that we had on the IFC side, all of the fan data that NASCAR had through their fan campaigns now lives in one data warehouse. So when we're trying to market to different campaigns, we're easily able to exclude and include, whatever segments we want to talk to, so that if we're trying to market 3 different events during Q1, each of them are taking place in Florida, Talladega, and Homestead. We're making sure that, all right, what is the priority of of John Smith, and are we not making sure we're not just oversaturating him with different messaging?
And have you, I mean, having that view and seeing John Smith, that you found out, hey, John goes to all three, have you actually started tweaking and developing offers because now you've got that data to be able to say, hey, here's a 3-track pass, or here's a 3-race pass, you can go to any one and effectively, I guess, lift the per cap out of some of those sales?
Yeah, we're starting to do a little bit more of that. But one thing that we did do is we had our first 2 races of the season were at Daytona. Our third race, second venue of the year was Homestead, Miami, right? So what we would do is if we knew fans had a ticket at Homestead but didn't have a ticket at Daytona yet, we would try and cross-sell them on those opportunities. Same with Daytona 500. That's our sport's biggest priority, so we would really prioritize that messaging first. But the weeks between after someone came to a Daytona 500 event, if I know they live in Fort Myers or I know they live in Miami, and I know that they don't have a ticket to Homestead, but I know they're a NASCAR fan because they were just here a week ago, why don't they have a ticket? Can we provide them some type of offer? Can we essentially try and keep them within the racetrack family? Yeah, we're definitely starting to do a lot more of that, especially within the different regions, because they're just, the way they're set up, they're all, distant from each other. But yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons I think that this merger took place, is to start doing a little bit more of that.
And also because you said, there's campers, people travel, it's an event destination, it's put it in your diary, you're definitely going to go. Driving and putting the trailer on and driving 5 hours to go somewhere, that's what you do. So it does make sense. So 2020 has been obviously tough for most sports. What has been the impact on your sport, and how have you gone about, navigating the COVID protocols, fans, no fans? What's been happening in your part of the world?
Yeah, so senior leadership made the decision to enact COVID-19 protocols for the Daytona 500 in October. So that meant we were going to reduce capacity to a certain amount to really enforce social distance seating between groups, right? So at that point in October, we were already oversold on our number of fans that could attend. So we had to work with admissions to essentially reseat everybody, because in order to spread these groups out, they have to be put in pods in different sections of the arena. So we reseat, that our admission team reseated tens of thousands of fans based on criteria like how long have they been coming to the race, how many days did they purchase to attend. The goal was to minimize as many people as possible that we would have to go back and tell that, yeah, you're not going to be able to come to the Daytona 500. But that ended up being still a couple thousand people. So, how do you make that? It's a situation that sucks, but how do you make it suck a little bit less? We started to do a few things. We worked with some of our partners like M&M's. We hand-delivered baskets to fans across the nation. And then on my team's side, we really focused on creating some cool digital experiences. One of those is we worked with our partner FanCam, and we've worked with FanCam now for the last 8 or 9 years. And typically, what they would do is they'd come to our event the day of the Daytona 500 and take this amazing photo of 100,000 fans in the venue that you can literally zoom up and see your face as clear as day as your seat. Tag yourself on social media, and it was a really cool fan experience. But with that, with not being able to have 100,000 fans, we wanted to try something different. So we created and had them fly out in advance of the event weekend. We had them take a photo of the empty venue, and we invited fans to essentially join us virtually for the Daytona 500 by filling our venue, filling the seats. Then we worked with NASCAR and the teams and the drivers, and we had the drivers film videos essentially trying to thank fans for continuing to support the event. The drivers were saying, it sucks that you can't be here. We wish you were here, but, thank you for continuing to follow me in our team. And we would hide those pieces of content throughout the scavenger hunt for little, hide and seek games. And then another thing that we did was we created this campaign called Virtual Victory Lane. So we only opened it up to fans that we had to tell, hey, you had a ticket to the 500, but you can no longer come. We created an experience where as soon as the driver's done, he wins the race, he pulls into Victory Lane. Victory Lane's a lot different than it used to be. There's no fans in there anymore. So how do we bring the fans to the drivers? Well, we do it through Zoom. So literally moments after he pops out of the car, he's got confetti flying, he's got the trophy. He's going to pop over, sit down, and talk to fans. So we would do, 5 to 10 to 15 different fans for each race. It's pretty cool to be able to bring someone who was originally going to come to the event, but unfortunately due to COVID couldn't come, we could still find some kind of way they could feel connected to the event by talking to the winning driver.
Yeah, terrific. I mean, fan cam, Tinnis, former podcast guest, and been lucky enough to be part of a few fan cam photos myself. I thought it was a really interesting way to, bring the virtual fan, as part of the experience. It's going to be interesting to see, like you said, with the victory lane there, how many of those activations stick and become things that we still do to engage the fans that aren't in the stands, on an ongoing basis, because it's a great way, for even when Daytona is full, there's still millions of people watching on, online and at home that still want to feel part of it. So it's going to be interesting to see how many of those things, stick in some form, as much as we're going to love people coming back to the track.
I mean, you see things like I think what the NFL did with that Bud Light cam at the end zone. If that has to stick around. I mean, the players seem to love it, and it's just an opportunity to continue to bring fans in, man.
Yeah, and exactly right. And those things like the Zoom rooms or watching, being in the tunnel, that particular, whether it's there's going to be a coach talking before the game, exclusive for members in a Zoom style format. I think that type of activation will continue going forward. So now into 2021, hopefully, the vaccines are rolling out and protocols are starting to loosen. Like, everyone's plans for 2020 just got thrown out the window when COVID hit. How do you make a plan for 2021 and set yourself up and set your team up to go, oh, this is what we want to do, but how do you set up a plan for this year?
Yeah, so we're finishing up Q1 for our events, which for Daytona, that's our busiest time of year. We literally have had events in our region for 8 out of the last 9 weekends. We're heading to Talladega here in April, and from there we have a little bit of a break until our next major event weekend in August. So each of our Q1 events that we've hosted have had COVID-19 protocols in place. But we're optimistic, so we're planning for that August event with multiple contingency plans, whether we're planning for a full venue with fan zone access to drivers. We're also planning for Plan B, which may be reduced capacity and still have access, and Plan C, which is reduced capacity and little to no access to the drivers. But the sport itself, especially NASCAR, has done a really great job taking it one step at a time. Senior leadership has been evaluating each event on the schedule in segments. So they're not saying, here's the plan for the next 20 weeks. They're looking at it in 3 to 4 week increments. Which allows us to, it gives us enough time to still alert fans if plans are changed, but it also leaves room for optimistic possibilities should things start to get better, especially in the near future where you're hearing, in May, the opportunity for everyone to get vaccinated should be opening up and some of those things. So for our region, especially for our event in August, which is kind of the next big event that we haven't really planned for yet. We're still approaching it from multiple angles and having multiple contingency plans as the year goes on.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, everyone, you've got to be adaptable, and it is good to see, like, from the top level, giving that flexibility. But, you have got, it's an open air venue. There is a lot of space. So there is capacity. It's not, you're not dealing with some of the difficulties that, stadiums, closed roof stadiums like basketball and hockey and the like, they have certain restrictions. So hopefully things do open up, and race days look like they did once again, which is complete pandemonium and people everywhere. But that's what you want. That's what we look for in our sport.
It's the best, man. We got Talladega in April, which is unfortunately going to be operated under some of those protocols. It'll probably look a lot different than any Talladega race you've ever seen, but that venue in particular is kind of known as the party venue. So they do what's called the big one on the boulevard the night before, where it's just a massive Mardi Gras. The campers there are probably the most rambunctious, but those are your hardcore fans, man. Those are the folks that they'll come to your event year after year, twice a year. They plan their vacation time around it. They're there die hard.
Definitely. Well, Matt, thank you very much. What I want to do is get into the Sports Geek closing 5.
Let's do it.
Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
So I had to think about this one because where I grew up in the Panhandle. There were no pro teams nearby. New Orleans Saints and Atlanta Braves were each 4 to 5 hours away, and there were no big collegiate athletics programs. So I think the first real sporting event I went to was probably a UCF football game on campus. But at that same time, we traveled to Chicago with a group of friends and went to a Cubs game, which I remember very fondly. And I went to a bunch of Buccaneers games while I was in college. But it was either that UCF football game or Chicago Cubs game that I distinctly remember going, okay, I finally have got to come to one of these events after growing up a humongous sports fan.
Wrigley Field's a good memory. I remember my first time I went to Wrigley Field, and you could feel the history just like envelop you when you walk into a ballpark like that.
It's the best, man. I love that place.
You would have been to a few sports events in your time, and you would have tasted the different gourmet options that are available at a sports event. Is there a favourite food memory or a go-to food, or is there something that's particularly NASCAR that you would recommend to the listeners?
Well, I don't know if beer counts as food. I mean, if that counts as food, that's.
No, yeah. Then you're getting into eating is cheating. No, let's stick with food. Let's stick with food.
So I would go with nachos, and for me, nachos, even just the chips and cheese aspect bring back a sense of nostalgia. But for me, nachos are my favorite food regardless. And like my goal in life is to create an app that tells you how many steps away you are from the nearest nacho. I haven't gotten there yet. It's in development at some point.
Then the added on bit is how many steps you have to take after the nachos to work off the nachos.
To walk them off,
yeah. So it's both a delivery app and a fitness app. Like it's
That's
merging
great.
The best of both worlds.
All right, I'm hired. So you're hired, Sean.
No worries. Well, when it's not the nacho app, what is the first app you would open in the morning?
So if you would have asked me this probably, last year I would have said Instagram. Instagram's still a very close second, but this year I've really made a conservative effort to kind of step up my networking game. So for me, it's really been LinkedIn. I've been on LinkedIn a ton lately. When you're in college, you're networking your life away because you're trying to find a job. And I think once you start getting settled in your career, at least from on my perspective, I stopped networking a lot. So I've made a conservative effort, especially over this past year, to reach back out to people, set up whether it's virtual chats or, would love to go grab coffee, grab a beer. Started to take more of those vendor calls that you're getting every 5 days or so, just trying to talk to people, understand what's out there. But for me, the first thing I open up is LinkedIn.
It's a really good point. It's a really good point. Like I've been a long time LinkedIn advocate, but like there's nothing sadder than someone changing their title for looking for work, right? And you can sit like, and it's and it has happened. There's been a lot of people furloughed, but then they start networking. When the key thing is when you are in a role and you previously would go to conferences or meet people or talk to vendors. Like there is value in building that network. It might not be the value might not be today. It will be later on. And so the track record that you just described in university, looking for a job, network like crazy, got a job. Oh, I'm good. Like that's actually the time you should be. So, so a big advocate. So please look up Matt Vinson on LinkedIn. Tell him that you listen to the podcast. That's perfectly easy to do segue there, Matt. Who is someone that you suggest the podcast listeners should follow and why?
So I'm going to give you two. They were both vendors that became friends, and they're both people that I happened to meet through Seat, which I think is where I met you as well. But the first is going to be Amir Zanozzi, who I believe is also now a guest here with the podcast.
He has been a guest a couple of weeks ago from this chat, but I actually recorded it. Like the beauty of podcasts, I actually recorded it just mere hours ago. So podcasting, like time travel. But yeah, Amir, a great guy at Zoomf. Why should people be following Amir?
Their company, Zoomf, is a data analytics company, and they're doing some amazing things from a partnership perspective, from a social media perspective, from a measurement perspective. But aside from following them just to see all the different partners that they keep signing new deals with every single day, just the things that they're doing from a measurement perspective is really out of the box. I think they're hitting a home run.
Definitely. So this is the sly plug, and this hasn't been placed, but yeah, go check out the Zoomf episode in the Sports Geek Amplified series. That's at sportsgeekamplify.com. But yeah, highly recommend that. And you had a second person that you wanted to recommend.
Second is Lenny Go with Tradable Bits. I know you guys have done a lot of work with Tradable Bits there as well, but Lenny was someone I met at my first SEAT conference out in Vegas. And if you've never been to the SEAT conference, it can be kind of intimidating because there are a lot of cliques, a lot of group of friends that until you kind of get brought into one of those groups of people, it's pretty intimidating. But Lenny's one of those guys who's always outgoing, and he'll lend out that hand to bring new people in. And he did that for me at SEAT conference in Vegas. I mean, it took 4 or 5 years before I could convince our management team to let's use Tradable Bits. I think once we did, we created some really cool campaigns, and they actually just helped us with a campaign for the Daytona 500 where we've got a healthcare partner in Advent Health. We wanted to help bring awareness to wearing masks. They helped create a digital AR execution with us on Instagram that was branded with Daytona, branded with Advent Health. Really cool execution. They've done it for a few different teams, but Lenny and Amir are two of those guys that you not only when you follow them are they going to become your friends, but they're also always sharing best practices from their companies and from others.
Definitely. I think I was actually one of those first calls when I was visiting in Vancouver that caught up with you and Lenny. So yeah, definitely both have been former podcast guests. So yeah, dive into my archive there, Matt. So terrific stuff. Lastly, what social media platform is your MVP? So I can get you to answer this from a track perspective, but then also personally.
So I'll start with the track perspective, and this is how I kind of approached it. And I don't think enough people say this, and it blows my mind. But for me, it's still Facebook, man. From a business perspective and a size audience that we can reach from our track's perspective, Facebook is our MVP. Without it, it's a juggernaut. It's still hugely important, both in selling tickets and engaging fans, which are two of my team's goals.
Yep. Definitely. Like the ad product alone and the sophistication it has behind the scenes is so far in front. Like there are other platforms that are starting to play around in that space, but all they're doing is copying the playbook that Facebook's got, and Facebook has all the users. So I completely agree. And from a personal point of view, what's your MVP from a personal point of view?
I'll answer this one from a perspective of now. It's probably TikTok. I mean, when I'm on TikTok, I'm on TikTok from anywhere from 10 to 30 to 45 minutes at a time, because that app is so addicting and knows how to keep your attention just from the content it provides and serves you and knows what you like from the feed that you're curating. It's amazing, man. And as someone who went through the Vine aspect and what that became and was missing throughout the last, whatever it was, 10 years that Vine was gone, I think TikTok has hit a home run in what they're doing. And I'm addicted to it, man. I'm not even a teen girl, but
as a consumer or a creator, can we find some Matt Vinson TikToks online, or are you just a consumer in TikTok?
I am a consumer in the shadows. You will not see me, doing any dances, or I haven't gotten there from a content creative perspective yet. I've had to do a lot of case studies and work. Of course,
Yep.
Obviously, you want to be up to speed on if your team starts to do content on TikTok. You want to know how to do it, but I am a consumer in the shadows.
But it is vital to be knowing, and like you're like me, putting your engineer hat back on and going, what are the algorithms doing here? Why is it recommending me that? And it's probably because you're clicking that and watching that more and watching that again and those kind of things. But then it's like, okay, knowing and studying the algorithm does help you then frame and study what you can do from a content point of view. So, it doesn't mean, TikTok's been a funny one. Again, I'm not on TikTok, but I'm consuming it as a strategist and looking at it as a platform. I think there's a lot of value there, and it doesn't have to be, you've got to get your drivers doing this dance, or you've got to, there's an opportunity there for some clips, some meme type content. But the good thing about it, it's not it's Tuesday at 4, we have to put out our TikTok, which we've had on other chronological type platforms. So it's going to be interesting to see how it continues to evolve and what content keeps going, and then how their creator economy develops, and whether things like Instagram Reels, which have straight up copy and and having a lot of success, like where that's all going to land. So
that's one of my bigger pet peeves too, is like when organizations or even just, C-level executives say, okay, why aren't we on this channel? We need to be on this channel, right? And luckily, when I was at Daytona back in 2015, 2016, Snapchat blew up, right? So we spent an entire year developing a content strategy because from a track perspective, we only had 10 major event weekends. So what is going to be your content strategy throughout those other 42 weeks? We're not just going to jump in just to jump in. And then knowing when those platforms are useful. Like when Instagram straight copied Snapchat and all of our audience migrated there, we didn't need to use Snapchat anymore. So let's, we can nix that in our content strategy for 2019 or whatever it is and redevelop and focus on content for those platforms we are actually engaging on.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing, being able to adapt, and whether it's TikTok or, the current social audio renaissance at the moment with Clubhouse and Spaces. Like, are they going to survive, when people start coming out of their houses and talking to people in real life? Like, it's a little bit of like playing with the platforms to know how to use them. But yeah, for every TikTok and Instagram, there's Vine and all these other ones that have since come and gone.
Meerkat, yeah.
No, exactly. Matt, you go.
I was going to say, even with that, now you've got things like NFTs and things that are coming out at like lightning pace. And when's the right time to jump in on those? It's something new every day, Sean.
Yeah. I mean, if you're getting into NFTs, all it is people hearing dollar signs. It's obviously it's going through a thing. I think the Top Shop stuff. Like, I think it's all about, for the NFTs from mine. It's about the use cases for me. And yes, the Top Shot version of, hey, here's moments and they're buying them and it's a digital collectible, scarce. Like, that's just a use case that I think a lot more sports will do and go, we're going to do it. Here's, great NASCAR moments and here's great NFL moments, which will cause the market to be, there'll be a lot of moments in the market. And so the market will stabilize. But I think the idea of an NFT and how it might be used, we're still scratching the surface on how it could be used. So
I think you need to include a timestamp at the end of this podcast that says, in a year, if you're listening to this podcast after 2022, tweet me how you're using NFTs, or did those just go away?
I don't know. By 2022, this podcast will have been minted like an NFT, and people will be trading this podcast.
You can own it.
So yeah. If you want this podcast to be minted, please tweet at Sean Cullinan.
There you go.
And we'll set it up. While I'm plugging my own social assets, how can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm a pretty boring follow. I just retweet a lot, mostly so I can save it and go back and read articles later. I do follow another podcast that's a movie podcast, and I list my 100. They have a competition, 100 movies new to you that you watch every year. So I use Twitter to list my movies there, but I'm on Instagram, pretty private, follow mostly friends. But like you mentioned earlier, LinkedIn, that's the spot to find me. So if you want to network with me, I'm open on LinkedIn. Come find me. Let's talk.
Terrific. Well, hit up Matt Vinson on LinkedIn. Thank you very much, Matt. I look forward to the day when they let me back on a plane and visit your part of the world, and hopefully one day go to a track.
For sure.
Because it is one of the bucket list items. I've been to a few stadiums. I'm very proud to say how many Major League Baseball ballparks and NBA stadiums, NFL stadiums I've been to. But I've been to a few tracks, via seat, but I haven't been to one on a race day. So it's on the list. So we'll have to make it happen, hopefully in the next year or two.
Yeah, we need to get you down here for the Daytona 500, man. There's nothing like it, just from the awe of the spectacle of the event to how many people are here, just to the passion of the fans. Like, that event is on the pedestal of all of your top events.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, mate, and we'll talk soon.
Appreciate it, Sean. Thanks, man.
Learn from the Sports Geek Amplify Season 1 cohort. Timo, Vlast, Stellar Algo, Ubi Park, and Zoof. For more, go to sportsgeekamplify.com.
Thanks again to Matt Vinson. You can follow him and send him a tweet on Twitter at Matthew Vinson, Vinson. Be sure to reach out to him on LinkedIn. Tell him that you listen to the podcast. I really do get a buzz when I have former guests and Sports Geek alumni send me a message and say they're really surprised and thrilled with the response they got from people listening to the podcast. So if you can reach out to one of my Sports Geek podcast guests, whether that is Matt or anyone in the previous 297 episodes, I really do appreciate it. Before we wrap up, just want to talk a little bit about, digital to dollars, which is the work that we do with sports teams and leagues in helping them understand their digital assets. A lot of the stuff there we talk about with Matt around building out great campaigns, building out more data, understanding your fan base. Digital dollars is built for that. And it's very flexible in how we can work with you to implement it. It can be something of a refresher, or we can dive in on a particular pillar. For those of you who don't know the digital dollars process, it's 5 pillars. Know your audience, know your content, know your distribution, know your value, and know your pitch. And the whole goal of it is to solidify your digital strategy, but then expand on that to really develop the commercialization strategy of your digital fans and your digital content and your digital audience. And so it works for either a team, a league, an athlete. So please, if you're interested in rolling out or implementing digital to dollars process in some way, please reach out. Sean at Sports Geek HQ is how you can find me. That's it for this week's episode. As always, the places to go, sportsgeekhq.com. That's where you can find all things Sports Geek. Please check out the Sports Geek Amplify series. That's at sportsgeekamplify.com. And please, if you could share those episodes with people who you think it will help. That's the whole goal of the series. The goal of the series is to help sports business bounce back from what was a pretty terrible 2020, but let's make 2021 more promising. So check that out, sportsgeekamplify.com. And as always, I want to help you, and I want to work on big problems. I want to help solve big problems. You can do that by booking in for a phone call. Just go to sportsgeekhq.com. You reckon I'd be able to get it right after 12 years? /phone call. And you can book in a time. Let's have a chat. Let's figure out how we could work together. I love working with podcast listeners. That's it from me. My name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Have you listened to the Sports Geek Amplify series? Go to sportsgeekamplify.com to listen.
Yes, Sounds the Game is back. This is live from a MCG with over 50,000 people. Go Pies.